Hi, guys. You wouldn't believe what just happened. It's the 13th. I flew on seat 13A in the aircraft, and my computer just crashed 5 minutes ago, and it's just rebooted. So that's why I'm getting updates over there. I'm in control. Is everybody having fun at CSSconf so far? Has anyone learned something new today? Oh, that's good. OK, we're going to go and learn some other new stuff today. My name is Razvan, and I work in a team at Adobe called Web Platform. And a lot of my teammates work on web standards and implementation of CSS features in browsers such as WebKit, Chrome, and Firefox. Now, part of my job is to play with all of the cutting-edge CSS features they built to figure out how they work in the browser, how they work with various other features, and to come up with new use cases for them. Now, as you can imagine, it's a pretty fun job because I get to live on the cutting edge daily. And it's also a very frustrating job, because if something happens to go wrong, the answer usually is not simple, and there's no Stack Overflow thread that I can check. But today I want to talk about the excitement around this stuff. Today I want to go through some new features coming to CSS that deal with layout and graphics. Now, I have a lot of code samples and a lot of demos to go through, and barely enough time to do it, so I'm just going to jump right in to CSS Regions. Regions is a feature that was invented to bridge the gap between layout done in traditional print magazines and something which was not possible in digital publishing. So in newspapers, you're used to having a layout with content flowing from oh my God, my computer is still starting. Sorry about that. So newspapers have content which goes from one box to another and from one page to the other. And this was missing from the web. On the web, you usually have one slab of content, and you scroll through it to get to more text. So CSS Regions essentially is a feature that allows you to control where content goes on your page and what happens to that content when it doesn't fit into a box. So for example, you could use CSS Regions to flow content into another element rather than hide it or scroll it. And because we're dealing with digital publishing, we want to flow that content wherever we want on the page, much the same way we want the same flexibility that traditional print designers have. CSS Regions work in a two-step mechanism. So let me bump up the font size for a second. I hope everybody can see this. So in a first step, we use a selector to collect some content into what's called a name flow. We use the flow into property. And we're basically telling the browser, look, I want you to keep a hold of this content and keep it in this bucket, which I called my flow, because I want to work with it. At this point, the content does not render on the page anymore. It's like you would use display none on it. It's still there in the DOM, but you don't see it. The important part is step number 2, where you actually control how to show the content. And you use a selector again, you pick some elements, and you make them pull the content from the name flow. This is turning those elements into regions. And the content will start flowing into the first region. What did not fit into the first region will go into the second region, and in the third region, and so forth, until all of the content from that name flow has completely appeared on the page. The main advantage here is that these elements, can be whichever shape or size you want them to be, and they can be anywhere in the DOM. Is everybody with me on this one? Here's an illustration of how this actually works. So we have our flow collected in one place, and we have our elements, which are going to be turned into regions, and they're positioned across the screen that have different sizes. And when we marry the two together, we get our content appearing in the outline or in the shape of the regions we have used. But enough with the pretty pictures, let me show you some demos. If the demo gods are going to be with me today. So the first one I have is a concept of a digital publication. So over here I have one page of content, which is going to a second one, and possibly to a third one if it doesn't fit. And all of this text is flowing through regions. So this text over here is going to go to the second one, and all the content that did not fit here is going to go to the second page. So let me just select some text and resize the page so you can see what's going on over here. So as we do that, you're going to see my Spotify window in the back. But what's more important is the content that's being flown between regions over here. So as I go to the second page, we're going to see that content move across from one box to the other. Now, I'm sorry, but my Spotify is private, so I'd rather quit that one before anybody sees my music preferences. OK, so this is a concept of digital publishing which echoes back to traditional print. But I want to show you a different twist to this one. Here's a demo that we did with content from National Geographic, and it's a story about orphan baby elephants. And yeah, I know, it's sad. Oh. Before I tell you how this demo works, I'm going to scroll through some of the content, so you see some of the text, some of the pictures. Yeah. So it's a neatly designed article, and if you've been paying very close attention, you've seen that the amount of text and the amount of picture occupies exactly one viewport height. And that's not by accident. This is using CSS regions to flow content between regions that are using viewport height units. Now, for those of you who don't know what those are basically a way of defining something which is 100% of the viewport, and only the viewport can define that size. So as we have this content over here and we resize the page, the content is going to slowly disappear, and it's going to appear beneath this photograph over here. And this is a very neat thing to do, especially on mobile devices, when scrolling is not very precise. So you're less likely to lose your place when you're reading, because all of the text fits within one viewport, and you have a picture right after it. So it gets difficult to lose your place. OK, going back to regions, we kind of figured out by this point that it does the job that we want it to do. It can do digital publishing like you do traditional publishing. But a very important side effect we noticed, and this was unexpected but really valuable, is that what we're achieving here is markup separation. Because of the two-step flow that makes regions work, we collect content from one place and we inject it into another, we can separate our semantic markup from our layout markup, the one we have to use every now and then to make things look just right. So we can essentially use CSS regions to inject our content into something which resembles HTML templates. Now, if you're not very comfortable with doing decorators in Shadow DOM, maybe this is something to pique your interest. Of course, this opens up a lot of new possibilities for responsive design. And I'm going to show you one of them. So this is a rough sketch of a web application that you would possibly have on the web. So you have some buttons in the header, and then you have some links in the footer, and your content in the middle. Now, to do this responsively to adapt to a phone size or a small screen, a common design pattern is to group all of the non-essential navigation controls into a menu that slides to the side. But that's difficult to do with the features we currently have, because these elements are in different DOM order positions, and you can't really rip them out and put them into a single element. However, if we were to use CSS regions, we could do something like this. So notice the elements at the top and the elements in the footer. And as I resize this page, I can collect all of those elements, and I can flow them into a menu which is in off view. So when I resize back, I get my other layout, the full-size layout. I'll just jump into the code really quickly to show you what's happening here. So I have this aside ID menu over here. Let me bump up the font size just a little bit. And at a specific media query, when I get really, really small, you can see this is going to consume the content from the name flow called controls. Now I'm generating this name flow at the specific media query, and I'm collecting all of those elements and putting them into the side menu. Pretty neat stuff, because this adds a lot more options to when you want to do responsive design with the tools you already have. And something that's really important here is that regions are only visual containers. So any event handlers you would have attached or any styling you have on those elements, they will still work. Regions just position them visually into some other place. They still live in their original DOM positions. Is that cool? Yeah, thought so. Thank you. CSS Regions is being implemented in WebKit and Google Chrome, and of course in the Opera version that uses the Blink engine. And there's also a partial implementation starting with Internet Explorer 10, which is using an older version of the spec. OK, going forward to CSS blending. This is part of a bigger spec called blending and compositing. Now, compositing is the graphical operation that the browser does to merge two shapes or two elements into a single shape. Blending, on the other hand, is the graphical operation of mixing the color values and the transparency values of the two elements being composited. It's a bit tricky to explain without graphics, but I have some pretty pictures. So up until now, browsers have given us simple alpha compositing. We have an example here of multiple backgrounds, and I'm using a linear gradient, and I'm putting underneath it a picture. So with simple alpha compositing, where you have the semi-transparent gradient, you get the effect on the left, which is basically a way for the browser to tell you, this is what I could do for you. Now, with blend modes, we can convince the browser to give us something more Instagram-ish like this. So this is using a background blend mode called overlay. I guess the effect is instantly visible. But how do these background blend modes work? Well, they're essentially a mathematical function in which the browser takes the color value and the alpha value of a pixel, and it runs them through an operation with the alpha value and the color value of another picture. In this case, we have a source and a backdrop, and the result you get through that mathematical function is the blended result. So let's just jump quickly into code here. I'm going to use the web inspector again. So this is where I'm trying to blend a background image from the source with a background color. And as I change the color of the background, the blended result instantly changes. And this is just using a hard light blend mode over here. We can choose, for example, multiply, which is going to give us a different result. Or we can try screen, and we get a much lighter result. So this is essentially allowing us to build textures on the fly with multiple backgrounds right into the browser. There are a lot of blend modes to choose from, and each of them will have slightly different results depending on the input images you give them. I definitely encourage you to try them out and figure out which works best for you. So far, we've only been speaking about background blend modes, because honestly, it's one of the few things that's implemented in a browser. A very cool thing that's coming up next is element blending. The possibility of blending different elements together. For example, you could have some paragraph text and a background texturized image, and when you mix blend the two, you get this lovely texturized text effect without having to go to an external program to generate new images. Now, this opens up a lot of possibilities for doing customization to your designs. And I'm pretty excited about this one. I can't wait to play with element blending. In terms of implementation, I've shaded all of the browsers partially out because all of them have partial implementations. There are background blend modes, element blend modes, and canvas blend modes. And each of these browsers has part of the implementation, which is ongoing. Let's talk about shapes. We have shapes in CSS. We have rectangles. We have tall rectangles. We have squares, small squares, tiny squares. I guess you know where this is all going into. We also have rounded rectangles, because we have border radius. We have tall, rounded rectangles. And if you push the border radius far enough, you get a circle. But deep down inside of its heart, it still knows it's a square. OK. Maybe I'm poking too much fun at CSS. There's this collection of shapes of CSS on CSS Tricks where people have used different features, different quirks of features to generate shapes in CSS. So we have our squares, we have the rectangle again, circle, ovals. This is somebody who's using borders to generate triangles. And it goes on. These are pretty creative uses of features. My favorite one is the space invaders over here. This is super cool. Somebody's using multiple box shadows to generate the space invader shape. Now, I do have a lot of respect for these guys because they're using their creative skill to generate shapes. But unfortunately, these are not the shapes we are looking for. Anna had a very great presentation earlier where she was bending and twisting elements to get those awesome 2D or 3D shapes. But the limitation we have with this is that these are only illusions of shapes or representations of shapes because they have no effect over the layout of the content on the page. So with this problem in mind, I would like to introduce you to CSS Shapes. This is a new specification and implementation which aims to resolve that problem. CSS Shapes is a way to define practical, reusable shapes that can affect the content on the page. And shapes come in two shapes. You have shape inside, which controls the wrapping of the content within an element. So you can wrap text inside of a circle, for example. The shape inside works with a number of functions. So we can have circles, ellipses, which are basically squished circles, rectangles, or polygons. And then there's shape outside, which allows you to define the wrapping of the content outside of an element. So for example, we have this floated image over here, and we want the text to wrap neatly around it. So I'll just jump quickly to a demo with shapes. This is something I put up in one of the mornings I was trying to have a nice cup of coffee. So this is using CSS Shape Inside for the key ingredients text over there. It's wrapping the content into a text. The element itself is floating, so we have content flowing around it. And then we have the image of the lovely espresso cup and the text flowing around it as well. But circle shapes they're interesting, but we can do more complex shapes. And this is actually the promise that aims to be fulfilled. So we can use polygons and define very complex shapes for our content with a series of points, or we can use a source image, and we can derive the shape out of the non-transparent parts of that image. Now, in order to demonstrate complex shapes, I have a demo that I want to show to you. We gave some thought, and we thought of demonstrating to web developers a way of enhancing visual storytelling using CSS shapes. And to do this, we teamed up with an awesome agency in Paris called Ultra Noir, who designed us some lovely graphics for the Alice in Wonderland story. Now, we came and added the graphics and stitched some CSS shapes on top of it to build an interactive and engaging experience of reading the Alice in Wonderland story. Now, this is the first time anyone outside of Adobe has seen this demo, and I'm a bit nervous because it was never built to show on a resolution this small. But I've been tinkering with it, and I think I got it just right. So this is a graphical way of telling the Alice in Wonderland story. And immediately you're struck by the way text is being wrapped around the shape of the tree and around the shape of Alice. And this is a scroll-driven navigation. So as I slowly scroll down, at one point we're going to start moving the text with a margin top. And this is done, actual layout done by the browser, and the text is going slowly into that rabbit hole over there. We're going to slowly, oh, of course, and it goes back up if we scroll back up. So we're going to slowly crossfade to the second scene where Alice falls through the rabbit hole. She's a bit disoriented, and we have a bunch of mushrooms over here and weird flowers. It's apparently a very messy rabbit. And we have some shape outside around that mushroom over there, and the text follows the shape. And at one point in the story, Alice reaches the caterpillar, with which she has a conversation. We used a subtle transition with CSS filters over there. And the storyboard we got from Ultranoir, the agency, said, what if the caterpillar, as she's smoking something in the story, what if her words are actually puffs of smoke? And this is an excellent example for using CSS regions, because CSS shapes, I'm sorry. As I'm scrolling down the content over here, I'm using a cloud shape, and I'm wrapping the text inside of it, and I'm growing that shape slowly, and of course animating it out because puffs of smoke are lighter. So there's a conversation going on between the caterpillar and Alice here, and I'm slowly scrolling so you can get the sense. Of course, I can scroll back down, and the caterpillar is going to inhale the smoke back in. So this is animating CSS shape inside on the fly. So the conversation goes on. Alice is very unhappy that she keeps changing sizes, and the caterpillar, which is a very trustworthy caterpillar, says, why not eat some mushrooms, because it solves problems. So she goes ahead and she eats the mushroom, and because she does that, she meets the Cheshire cat. So I'm actually pretty happy there was no presentations today with cats, because I get to show the first one. So this is a shape outside around a floated cat. So the text will go around the cat over there, but at the same time, it still snugly fits in the rabbit hole over here. And as we slowly scroll down, we have this music. We have multiple images of cats as the cat is falling down, and the text is wrapping around the cat shape. And at some point, the cat reaches the ground. It has a conversation with Alice. And Alice follows the cat because, of course, cats are trustworthy in this realm of Wonderland. So Alice follows through the story. We have some other shapes to direct the attention of the user. And at one point, Alice goes to the queen's garden, and she plays croquet. And the story goes a bit like this. So as Alice is playing, there's a slow apparition of the Cheshire cat with which she has a conversation. And we thought it would be really cool to have the cat shape carved out into the text of the story, and to slowly make the cat appear, just like in the real story of Alice in Wonderland, like 1 year, and of course, by the end, the cat is grinning because she's only a floating head. And as the queen keeps yelling, off with her head, there's no body to behead the cat from. And of course, because this is all a scroll-driven navigation, everything works in reverse, and we get to a point where we have a floating cat. And it's going right back up. Now, I'm pretty happy I have a bit more time left to show you something really cool. Because while building this demo, initially we tried doing the shapes in Photoshop or in an outside software program. And that proved to be a very difficult way to work because we were basically designing the shapes in a software, and we were then exporting them and importing them into the browser to see how they look. And that doesn't work well with responsiveness. So as I was trying to rotate, increase the font size or rotate the shape, I would have to go back to the software, export a new shape, run it into the browser, see if that works. And that's not a very fun way to spend your workday. So we came up with a pretty interesting solution. What if we could use something to affect the shapes right into the browser? So we built a small browser extension that allowed me to, let me just refresh for a while. I'm trying to make this all fit into the screen, and it gets difficult. There you go, CSS Shapes. So we built a CSS Shapes editor extension into the browser. So I'm going to go ahead and inspect this content over here and turn on the shape editor. Let's move that down. And this makes working with OK, that's exciting. I haven't even shown you the demo yet. So this generates a polygon by the shape inside property we have over here, and it made it all the more easy to work with the shape and edit it right in the browser over here and instantly see the results as I'm scrolling. So for example, if I don't want to move around Alice, we can do something like that. Or, of course, add more points or remove more points. So this is going to, i.e. double click over here is going to add different points, so you can mess up the shape every way you want it. And this, of course, works for both shape inside and for shape outside. Now, this is part of the effort of offering tooling for these awesome CSS features. And I'm pretty glad this works, because if not, I would still be wasting my time in Photoshop right now exporting and importing shapes, and I wouldn't be here. So with this out of the way, I can go back to my slides, and I can tell you that CSS Shapes is being implemented in WebKit, in Google Chrome, and I also listed Chrome Canary over here because that's where the implementation is usually ahead of its game from Google Chrome. The CSS Shapes features are behind a Chrome flag, so you can enable them, and you can go ahead and play with them. Now, today we've looked at more options to do responsive layout design with CSS Regions. We've seen how we can use CSS background blending to generate textures on the fly right into the browser and to offer much more customization to our designs. We've looked at CSS Shapes to wrap content inside and around very complex shapes and to break free from the clutches of the rectangle. These are all features. These are not prototypes. These are not experimental features. These are upcoming CSS features which developers are actively working on, and they will be enabled in your browsers soon. I sincerely believe these are features which can help you design more expressive web applications and web sites. And I'm pretty sure, Harry, you're going to have a much difficult time negotiating with your designers after these features start kicking in. If you want to learn more about them, I encourage you to go to html.adobe.com. That's where you're going to find links to tutorials, these demos, and more importantly, how to enable these features in your browsers. Go ahead and get used to them, play with them, experiment, because eventually you will have access to these features and you will be able to use them. And with this, I thank you.